5, 4. We are live! Yay! We are back after a month. Hello, everybody. So we have everyone here with us. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of us on the podcast. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to introduce you one by one so that anyone who is listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever on the website can recognize your voices. Starting over here, we have Carlos from Campos. Hi, Carlos.
Hello, guys.
We have Connor from Cafe Culture.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Connor. We have Gabriele from Scapegoat.
Hi, everyone.
We have Joss and Ben from Brother of Mine Coffee.
Yo. Hello.
We have Eleni from St. Ali.
Hola. Hello.
We have Sasha from Fat Poppy.
Heya.
And we have Will from Showbox.
Hey, everyone.
Hello, everybody. We are going to have a very fun conversation today about the tour event that just happened in Australia. This is going to be an interesting conversation to kind of moderate between the 9 of us, but let's just go for it. And I have so many questions I want to ask all of you, but remember, this is a conversation. It's not an interview, so feel free to just jump in whenever. I think that I'm going to start with asking each of you kind of like what it feels like having come to the events and then gone back to your workplaces. Did you find the way that you approached your workplace differently? I might start with Joss and Ben.
Oh, first on the mic.
Well, you've got the most clarity in the sound. Are you two musicians by any chance, or do you have your own podcast or something?
No.
Neither.
None of you above yet.
What do you?
Space,
okay, that's what's going on, because
We'll
that sound quality is map it sideways. Love it.
Yeah, no, we definitely enjoyed it. We brought a couple of guys from our team with us. It was really powerful to sit back and listen to the energy that came from them, especially at the airport on the way back. Isaac,
what was it like?
It was amazing. Like, Isaac was just really, really amped, and you could see his shoulders were just like high, and he was just ready to go. And then purposefully we tried to sort of leave the conversation to sort of come through the guys that came with us to the rest of the team, and to hear that feedback from other people and to feel the energy move across our team was amazing. I think mostly it was the fact that what we've been sort of trying to talk about within our sort of team, you guys are talking about that similar stuff, and it really resonated. So I think it was like affirmation, it was confirmation for those guys that, yeah, this path is the right pathway. So
I think that the collaboration throughout the team and trying to get the impact of industry-wide, just from outside of our own 4 walls, was something that we've been sort of shouting about, and that was just amplified, particularly on that last day of the event. And the effect was profound. It really did hit all of us. We took some time to digest it, and it is something that is every day we are talking about still.
Yeah,
that's so cool. I have to tell you, I'm the same. Like, I'm still processing from the whole thing.
And look at the connections. I mean, it's crazy.
It really is insane.
Some of these faces are very familiar, and we've been connecting, with the guys from Cat and Cloud, and it's like all of a sudden all these doors have opened and all these networking opportunities have happened, and I think we're all trying to do the same thing, right? Make this industry better. Someone
said to me, or a couple of people have said it, from workshops that happened before this event as well as at this event. I think, Gabe, you mentioned it to me, that this is bringing together a certain kind of people from within the coffee industry, and it feels kind of awesome. Go ahead, Gabe.
It does. Yeah, it certainly does. Like, it was an amazing experience for me. It was really good. I am very, very small, so I don't have much of a chance to connect with other people. And this industry, it's quite hard, to be honest, to, you know, get out there and feel comfortable with other people and connecting. At least, you know, that's my experience. I'm not saying that's for everyone. But it was a very beautiful experience to attend to the event. And yeah, it opened up so many questions, and it did feel like everybody was there for sort of the same reason, and improve themselves and improve the industry. And yeah, it's sort of the event raised so many questions and great conversations. And yeah, ever since then, yeah, my head has been spinning, and I don't feel like I have, you know, decided some things, but it's definitely, it feels like there is a community out there that I belong to, I can reach out to. And that's the main thing that I took away from it, that is like, I'm not as isolated as I thought I was before. And there is lots of people that I can reach out to now that have got more experience and more insight than I have, and believe the same things that I do.
That's outstanding. I think it was you that gave me some feedback that you would like a Facebook group to be started from the people who attended both in Sydney and Melbourne. We're actually going to be starting a Map It Forward Facebook group for people who attend our workshops in general, to be able to go in there and continue the conversations with people that have attended, because I think we're right. We're attracting a certain kind of person to these workshops, and I want to make sure that these people can connect, and you can continue to have conversations and network that way and not lose each other.
And it is,
go ahead.
As you mentioned, it is conspiring to each other's success. Like creating a community is the first step, and then everything else sort of falls after that, because you've got other people to talk to, and you've got people to connect to, and create the culture that you want to create.
Yeah, it's quite limitless, isn't it? Lenny.
Yes.
Tell me, did you find that after the workshops that you went back, and did it affect your workplace in any way, or the way that you approach?
I found that when I went back to work, I just had like a sudden boost of energy.
Awesome.
And I still do. I still do. It not that I didn't before. I love my job. I love where I work. I love everyone who I work with. But I felt like when I went back, I was like, okay, cool. I've sort of figured out things that I can improve, and I've noticed more things. I just became more aware of situations which could be improved, and I kept thinking back to the discussions that we were having, and it all related, and it helped. And I don't know, I just had a great time, and like I said, I just felt like I had a boost of energy, and it's good. And I've been talking a lot to people at work about Map It Forward, and they were all surprised that they didn't know about it. And they were like, I'm looking forward to going to next year, based off how energetic I was about it too. They're like, well, if you had a great time, I think I would really enjoy it as well. I'm like, yes.
We'll slip you a 20 later, Lenny.
Yeah, well, no, that's what happened. That's the truth.
Thanks.
But it was great. I definitely feel like I have in some way changed my mind, how I work, and how I communicate with people on the job, and how I feel when I wake up every day to go to work.
Yeah, awesome.
It's sort of a little different to how it was before, which is good.
That's fantastic. How about you, Sasha?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to so many like professional development workshops in that, like SCAAs and things like that.
You ran the SCAAA ones,
yeah,
SCA ones in Australia,
exactly.
Didn't you?
Yeah, and I've been so keen doing all that stuff for so many years. And I think what was so different about Map It Forward is that there's been so much that sort of focuses on coffee education, which is great. But Map It Forward was more about like professional development. And I've never seen you sort of like an event tackle like things that, you don't get to sort of do in your own industry specific to, I guess, your subject matter. So it's sort of looking at like, different things in your industry that help you with professional development that are really specific to coffee. And I think that, yeah, it was just super unique. And I think it's really easy to get complacent in a workplace and, you know, not step outside. And it's amazing, yeah, when you go to something like this. And I definitely think your event was just super unique. And yeah, it just re-inspires you. And it's sort of like awesome. Great, like, yeah, so super
That's
awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you. What about you, Will? Did you find that you went back to work and you approach things differently?
Yeah, totally. Like after the weekend, I just went back and just had a different approach to like even just day-to-day situations and working with like my staff and such. And yeah, it was just great. A lot of the things that were said, especially on the day with the cafe owners one, which is like really thought-provoking, and yeah, just taking that and just, I don't know, like looking at the cafe at the moment and trying to like implement those kind of things into it. This is great.
Yeah, awesome. We're going to deep dive into a whole bunch of them of things in a second. But Carlos, what about you? You and I chatted quite a lot during my delayed stay in Australia. You and I chatted quite a lot. How did you find that the event ended up affecting you in your workplace, in your career, essentially? How do you think it made you look at your career differently?
I got really inspired by different talks talking about culture and building a better culture at work. Yeah, I got the big takeaway that I took is that starts from people in the leadership team. And so after the event, that's what I've been trying to apply in my team, changing step by step, getting people more motivated and encouraging them to express themselves in however way they want to do it, and not try to impart the same way for every person. And yeah, slowly that is changing. I think we're getting good results, and definitely map it forward was what helped us starting the conversation about.
That's something that we kept hearing a lot about from people who wanted to share their feedback straight away. We haven't sent the surveys out for feedback yet, but something that we kept hearing from a lot of people was, we're starting conversations. And I was wondering, have any of you experienced that conversation starters have resulted from this and you were more able to approach conversations? Anyone? Go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. I've pretty much not stopped having conversations about Map It Forward since I left the seminars on the weekend. I'm pretty sure my team must be getting a little bit sick of me starting various different mini debates on the road and in the office about various topics that were covered, because I found myself wishing they were there. Everyone I interact with in the industry.
What kinds of conversations, Connor?
Covering lots of different things, from how important culture is and how we can all be working together to empower each other within whatever space we're working in, how we can all make sure that we are supporting everyone around us as individuals, not just, recognizing that there is no cookie cutter style for people in this industry or any other. We all have our own individual wants, desires, quirks, and those are our strengths as well as our weaknesses. We need to be covering each other and helping each other to grow within our roles, within our company, within our team, within our partnerships, as individuals. And
that's really profound.
Thank you. It was quite the eye-opener for me. Helped me reevaluate my priorities, refine what I engage with and what makes me passionate, and why I love this industry so much and the people in it, because there's so much passion around, and it's so easy to burn out if either you're channeling that passion the wrong way or you're not being supported in the passion that you're putting forward. There's any sorts of things that could go wrong. That doesn't mean that you need to change your approach. Maybe the environment's not right for you. I think what Jared was saying about the cat and cloud approach of, you know, making sure that they are exceptionally picky in who they hire, so that you could be a fantastic human being, you could be delightful and hardworking and wonderful, but if you don't fit the culture for the company, it's not going to work for anyone. It will make them feel frustrated. You won't be getting an employee who is working to the best of their capabilities within this role. It's making sure that you start by having an honest conversation, person to person, not just employee to employer, understanding each other on a really basic level of what do you want, what do you need from life, what do you need from a job and a role, and how can we help you grow in it. There was far too much for me to cover.
Wow.
Inspiring.
Because in Sydney we had another. So in Melbourne there was the Matt Perger and Jared Truby conversation about competition, and in Sydney that spot was taken up by Jamie Berry, the psychologist, and he spoke about assertiveness and mindset. And Connor, I know that was a bit mind-blowing for you, right?
Just a little bit, yeah.
It was so mind-blowing for everyone that was in that room that every single person came up to me and said afterwards, when is he coming back? Can he do a whole day next year? It's like, okay. So for you guys that were in Melbourne, Jamie started talking about assertiveness, and he was talking about the way that we can learn how to communicate more effectively through understanding this assertiveness seesaw. And so on one end of the seesaw is aggression, on the other end of the seesaw is passive, and right in the middle is assertiveness. And he went into detail about what aggressive communication is, what passive communication is, what it feels like to communicate in those two mindsets, or what it feels like to receive communication in those two mindsets, and then how you can flip both of those to bring them more into the center so that it's assertive. And it was like pretty much a game changer for everybody in the room. I took a lot from that, and I speak to Jamie pretty much 4 or 5 hours a week, and it still blew my mind the way that kind of was delivered. I know, Carlos, that was a big one for you, wasn't it? I think is he there?
Definitely, that was my favorite.
Yeah.
Yep. That was my favorite. The one that I felt more identified with, or the one that applied for my role. Definitely, I'm in a position that when talking to my colleagues and my team, sometimes I move from assertive to aggressive, and it's something I really want to work on, and it was awesome to have Jamie giving techniques and tips on how to work on that. And that was my favorite talk. And
Will, were you in the room for that one?
To...
Sorry,
Yeah,
Carlos, to cut you off there. It stopped. I thought you had finished talking.
I did.
Oh, okay. Will, how did you find that session? Because that was pretty intense for everyone.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty intense conversation, but I think it was really relevant into like the workplace and like how, interacting with each other day to day, and like how we can, how to be more assertive, I guess, and like in that. And I feel like it's something that's not really being talked about at all, and something that's not even, I don't know, like even a thought on, like, people just don't understand that, I guess, Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We received such a massive response to Jamie's input for that we are booking Jamie for a full day right before MICE, and we are going to be doing a full day workshop with him for the coffee industry. and hopefully it is actually going to be paid for by ASCA. So it's going to be free for everybody, and it will be televised, will be broadcast live, as well as later you will be able to watch it on their website. So we've organised that. It was such a huge success having Jamie talk about these things, and I guess it after that, Kieran, the president of ASCA, was in the room when it happened, and we realised this is pretty much a silver bullet for the coffee industry if we can teach people how to communicate assertively rather than aggressively or passively, and we're all saying what we mean and meaning what we say. Imagine what kind of bliss that would be. So so that's what we're going to do. We're going to we're just finalizing some dates at the moment, so we just got to get ASCA on board with that. If not, we're just going to find a way to fund it, because it's just so important for the way it was spoken about. And we're definitely bringing Jamie on tour next July when we do this. Oh yeah, spoiler alert, this is happening again next July, the tour. And by the way, boys in Perth, we're coming to Perth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be bringing the tour to Perth. We're going to do, from what we're doing, Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, and Perth next year in July.
Can I come to Vegas when it goes to Vegas?
You're more than welcome to. We may be doing Milan next year as well, so you're welcome to come to that. We'll see how that goes.
Pay for my flights.
Probably not, bro. We're not affiliated with ASCA. Just to put that out there, we're not affiliated with ASCA. But Kieran was in the room when all of that happened, and I basically said to him, "This is what your members want. This is exactly what ASCA should be doing for the community." And so we'll see what happens with all of that. I did want to talk about an interesting conversation. I think everyone except for Eleni was in the room when this particular conversation happened. And it was a really challenging discussion that was on the Roasters Day in both Sydney and in Melbourne. And I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about what you thought. We had a lot of positive feedback about the discussion that we had, specifically being not a man in coffee. That was the title of the conversation. It was an intense discussion both in Sydney and in Melbourne. I cried a bazillion times throughout all 3 days in both cities, so no doubt that one was a bit of a highlight for my eyes leaking. But I was wondering what you guys in general thought of that discussion, and what you're thinking after the fact. Because the last thing I wanted was for us to open this can of worms and then people went away and thought, well, that was a fucking waste of time. And I don't think that is what happened. But I'd love to hear what your thought of that discussion and how you see things now, how it affected you. Whoever wants to have a go, have a go.
I'm happy to talk about it because it's been the biggest conversation I've had since Map It Forward, far and away the root of most of the discussions I've had, because it really did affect me quite profoundly. Wow. It was such an intense discussion. Anyone in the room can attest to that. It could have been a calm and rational debate. It mostly was, but there was a lot of emotion in the room. There's a lot of shared thoughts, a lot of contrary thought, and a lot of fear, I think. A lot of people afraid of being caught on the wrong side of the conversation, fear of having missed something. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with men who haven't noticed it as an issue, that there being any kind of harassment or prejudice against people who aren't men within the industry. Generally, these men obviously aren't on the receiving end of any of this prejudice and harassment. And so it just poses the problem and the question of how can we as an industry, we as individuals help? You know, for example, myself as a man, how can I be helping other people who are on the receiving end of you know, the little snubs you get throughout a day, being treated with a different level of respect for having done the same amount of work, gone through the same trials? How can we help? What is our responsibility? And how can we engage everyone in coming together to create a solution for this? I mean, we all went into that room knowing that there is no one solution to this problem. There is nothing that we can all sit down and say, yes, this is the one thing that we must do to fix this issue across our industry and every other industry in the world. But having this conversation and actually recognizing it as an issue, I think, is the very crucial first step, because I don't know that this conversation hasn't been happening in a formalized way. So this was a big first step, actually engaging people in the topic, recognizing it, facing it full on, and saying, this is something we need to talk about. So here we are, let's talk. That was huge.
You work for cafe culture. Do you think that there's any chance that there might be some article written or some follow-up?
Absolutely. It's something that I have been trying to work out how to pen for a while. I want several people to weigh in on it. So I'm working out a couple of people who I would like to weigh in on the subject. For example, yourself, Sasha.
Yeah, you should definitely hit Sasha up for this.
Yes, 100%.
Please do.
Sasha had a wonderful conversation after that, because we just had too many thoughts that were just bubbling over, and we had to share them. And so, yeah, I would love to sit down and have a similar discussion to this, a bit of a follow-up of, okay, lots of thoughts, lots of feelings, lots of different perspectives. Let's compile them, make a few points about them, and then let's push this forward. Let's keep this conversation rolling.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to ask everyone to unmute their mics now, because I kind of want to bring some freedom to this discussion so that everyone can just jump in whenever they want without being asked. I wanted to tell you guys something that happened in the Sydney discussion, that it was actually Connor that made me aware of it. This obviously didn't happen in Melbourne. We were having the discussion that we had in in Sydney, and someone put their hands up and made the comment of, I think you're having this discussion about sexual harassment and abuse in the workplace and intimidation in the workplace with regards to women. I think you're having this conversation to the wrong room. And this person continued to move forward and defend his position. I found out later that this human was actually a sexual predator in our industry.
Oh, well, that's why.
There you go.
So what hope do us women have if, when we're in a group of people and we're having this open discussion and a sexual predator is sitting in the room and defending his position? I mean, it really does speak to the deep-seated, the roots and how deep they run with regards to how big an issue this is in our industry. What do you all think?
I think that's why it needs to be more important that we do and say whatever we can to make ourselves heard about the topic, no matter what situation that we're in. Even if we're talking to a stranger in the street, if we're talking to a crowd of 100 people, you know, we need to be able to be assertive about the topic and situation, so that if there's a chance of a sexual predator being around, that they are not able to respond with negative comments or try and twist your words and make it whatever they think is correct. Yeah,
and just to build on that, like, a sexual predator or not, nobody's exempt from the conversation. Gender inequality affects everybody. And just because I think on the day we heard a lot of, well, I don't do those things and I'm not that person, so therefore I have nothing to contribute to this conversation, which is just so wrong. It's like everybody needs to contribute to the conversation. Nobody is exempt. And whether you're a sexual predator or not, or whether you're a sexist or not, or whether you think those things are acceptable or not, you are part of the solution. And I think everybody needs to contribute. And I think like, yeah, that was something that was really surprising to me. We heard a lot of, well, I have a sister and I love my sister, so therefore, like, I don't have to contribute, or I have lots of female staff, so therefore I don't have to contribute because I love, you know, my female staff. It's like, just because you have a sister or a mother or you have female staff, it doesn't make you exempt from the conversation. And I think it's important that like people learn to not get on the defense and sort of remove their ego from conversations like this, and realize that when we're talking about gender equality, we're not saying you are, you know, the problem. We're saying these are the problems. Let's help us fix it. And I think, yeah, I think it's important to recognize, and definitely was sort of really obvious on that day was a lot of defensiveness sort of got in the way of a constructive conversation, which isn't unique to sexism or, you know, these debates. We see these debates whether we're talking about issues around race or issues around religion or issues around sexism. It just seems to be like, you know, it's a common reaction, and I think it's important that we sort of learn to, you know, remove ourselves from the nobody's pointing the finger at you specifically. We just need to have a constructive conversation if we want to see any change ever, you know, in the future.
Word.
And I think in fairness, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Sasha, I think in fairness as well, there's a pressure valve that was starting to be released for the first time in a very long time.
Oh, yes.
Maybe ever. This is the first time I know in the history of the coffee industry that this has been done in such a public forum, which is why I wanted to make sure that we started it somewhere. I'm so sick of it not happening. And the thing that was important was that people got an opportunity to say a lot of the things that they wanted to start saying. Whether a lot of the shit was defensive, I agree, but a lot of the stuff that started defensive unraveled into, well, actually, I just don't know what the fuck to do. And so that's the only way I know how to approach the situation.
Definitely. And absolutely. And I said this to you afterwards, Lee, like, yeah, I've been in specialty coffee since I was 17 and have been to like every possible conference, and never have I seen anyone tackle issues around women in coffee the way you did. So total bravery on your part, and such a good start to something that needs to continue a lot. And it's not just in coffee, it's in workplaces across the spectrum. But given that coffee is a, you know, rather male-dominated industry, it's probably really important that we take it seriously.
Yeah, and you know, I'm getting contacted by so many women on a weekly basis that are telling me that they've been inappropriately touched, they've been raped, they've been groped, they've been harassed at work. On a weekly basis, I'd get one or two of these, which is astonishing. That's since I started the podcast. You know, it's just so many people come up to me and tell me about, and men, honestly, there are some men that this has happened to, but predominantly women. And I just don't know how to let the greater coffee community know how prevalent this is. It's such a big fucking problem.
Such a big problem.
And the conversations were intense, to say the least.
Very intense. Yeah.
Lenny, I really wish you were there.
I really want to know what happened afterwards. Did this person stick around, or like what was their purpose there? Did they like so, did he just did they just come to sort of have an argument and then leave, or?
Well, so he left immediately after. There was still another session after that. There were two more sessions after that, and he left, but then came back the next day, and instead of sitting in the front row, he sat in the back row.
Ah, okay. I wish I saw this.
I was trying to find a way to actually confront him about it, and it's not off the table, because everyone, I was told, so here's the crazy thing. We have that discussion both in Sydney and in Melbourne, and in both situations, I had people come up to me afterwards and say, can I tell you what happened to me?
Oh, wow.
Men and women. and a couple of people that said, hey, listen, one day I want to get drunk with you because I can't tell you what happened to me straight. I will only have the courage to tell you about it when I'm drunk. So let's get drunk one day because I need to tell somebody what happened to me.
Wow.
And I just want to get to a point where we can find a way to constructively start these conversations in workplaces.
And I think that's it, Lee. It's like they're just conversations. I think like when we sort of start talking about these issues, a lot of people want to sort of fix the problem. Like it's that sort of knee-jerk reaction to be like, wow, there's a problem, quick, I have to fix this. So solution A, solution B, solution C. But these problems are complex and long-standing, and there's no quick fix to them. And you don't need a quick fix to them. I think it's just having these conversations, having a little bit more understanding, and then being a little bit more aware. And so people can be a bit more sensitive to these issues. So I think what you did was perfect. It's like you started a conversation which needed to be had and has never happened before like that in the coffee industry. And so you've already started it. I know, like, I haven't stopped having conversations since.
Yeah, great.
And I know that Connor's probably the same, and so many other people have not
Carlos is putting his hand
talking.
up as well.
Yeah, I can't even tell you how many conversations have started from like, you know, one conversation, and that is massive. That's massive.
That's huge. I gotta give props to Takumi-san from Clayboy. He hands down made me cry the hardest after this. He came up to me at the end of Sydney. So Takumi volunteered for the Friday and the Saturday, for the Saturday and Sunday, and then on Monday had to go to work, but insisted that we let him come back at 4 o'clock after he finished work to continue volunteering because he didn't want to miss anything. So then he came back, and I went to drop Jared and the boys off to have a drink with everyone. As I came back, he was leaving and he stopped me to say something that was massively profound. He said he had a cup for me. I posted that cup on Instagram. But I didn't tell on Instagram exactly what he said. Takumi-san said that he sat his team down that day, had men and women in it, and he said to them, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, I want you all to know that if in the last 2.5 years, in any way I have upset you, made you feel uncomfortable, or disrespected you in any way, that was never my intention, but I learnt at Map It Forward yesterday that my intention means nothing. It's my actions that mean everything.
Amazing.
I'm like, holy fuck, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And then said, we're going to start a conversation that's going to keep going within our team to see how we can fix this. I'm like, okay, this is pretty outstanding.
So
if
outstanding.
we can keep this going, yeah. Joss and sorry, go ahead. Who was just going to say something? Connor, I think that was you.
I think it was Carlos.
Yeah.
Someone speak.
Right.
I think it's Carlos.
Carlos, go ahead. Yes.
Say something there about the conversation about inequality, and that was the suggestion I did at the end of the talk. And it was, I think the big problem is that there's no definition for sexual harassment is in the coffee industry. So it is very open to subjective interpretations of what it is. And that makes it really dull and to talk about. If you have the space to talk about it, in events like that is where that should be discussed. But is there any way we can define what is in the coffee industry in Australia?
You know, that's really interesting that you say that, because you raised a really good point with me after that session. In Colombia, where Carlos is from, if you don't mention to a woman that she looks beautiful, most women tend to find that offensive. And in other cultures, if you mention to a woman that she's beautiful, she will find that offensive. And given that Australia, places like Australia and America and Canada and the UK, they're all very multicultural countries. And so when you have a melting pot of diversity like that, this suddenly becomes an infinitely more complex discussion, which is why when I was thinking about how we put that conversation together, I was thinking, well, I don't have any solutions. I don't think that we can come up with a solution that's going to say, right, this is a list of what sexual harassment is and what it includes, and this is what you should tell everyone not to do, and this is what the guidelines are that make it acceptable. Because that's not true the same way in America as it is in Saudi Arabia or as it is in Australia. You know, cafes in all of those regions are going to have very, very different boundaries. And that's why I decided that the best thing that we could do is teach people how to start conversations to define the culture within their workplace that helps people decide whether that's a workplace they want to be involved in or not. And I understand, like, you look at situations like 4Barrel, where it was systemic in 4Barrel, that from what I hear and what I've been told and what I know from people who have worked there, and your motherfuckers who want to come at me about 4Barrel, please do. I'm happy to go at you with this, because I've spoken to people behind the scenes way deeper than you can even imagine. And so after the event as well, and I know shit that's not out there in the press, it was absolutely systemic in 4Barrel, and they were fostering a culture of that in that workplace. And if people had have been able to, or had have been armed with knowing how to ask the right questions in an environment like that, they would have been able to know not to work there. And so I just think that the only way that we can move forward at this stage with where culture and society is at the moment is learning how to have that conversation and weed out sexual predators. And I want to ask you, Gabe, here, because I know that your girlfriend is heavily into this. Your wife, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, we talked a bit about this. I want to say I agree with Sasha a lot. She spot on, has got what's in my head. Very.
Yeah, you two should absolutely connect. You two would really, really get on in a
Yeah, can I meet your wife, please? Can we be friends?
So let's call it partner, because you're not completely comfortable with wife and husband.
Okay, your partner.
But yeah, that was all on me. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, so I approached Lee after this massive conversation that we had that day, the Roasters Day at the Map It Forward seminar. And my partner works at Our Watch, which is a national leading not-for-profit organization that works on promoting gender equality in workplace and society. And it's been founded a few years ago. It's sort of a recent thing, and they're working very, very hard to influence society in order to create gender equality, respectful relationships, and respect. And that goes beyond gender. It's across any sort of other discrimination, whether it is racial discrimination, sexual discrimination, disability, you name it. There's so many ways to discriminate people that we don't even realize. And as Sasha was saying, and thanks for saying it, we are all part of the problem, and we're all part of the solution, because it is a social norm. It is a social problem. So it is important, I think, to talk about it. It is important to raise the problem and to make it everybody's problem and everybody's solution.
Can I ask you something on that, Gabe? Something that I think a lot of people who would be listening to this and saying, but I'm not a part of the problem. This doesn't happen in my workplace, and I love all women and all humans, and I don't have a problem, so therefore it's not a problem for me.
Yes.
What would you say to those people?
I would say that it isn't a personal thing, and it isn't just a matter of what I do or what I don't do. So, you know, sometimes look at the conversation about marriage equality, for example, and how it has changed from what it was, where it was 20 years ago. Now, in the Western society, it's all more accepted than it used to be. It's not solved. Homophobia is still there. It's still a massive problem. But society has shifted. And everybody was part of the problem 20 years ago because, you know, we were all a little homophobic 20 years ago, whether we like it to admit it or not. The general consensus on not being straight, whatever form that was completely different from what it is now. As a society's thought, as a society's thinking. So that's what I mean when I say we're all part of the sub-problem and we're all part of the solution. You remember, I started off with, so when I intervened at the MIF Forward event, I mentioned it is a man's problem, and I think I didn't come across very well, and I didn't want to say that it is a man's problem because, you know, all men are sexual predators, or you know, it is a man's problem because men are bad. It is a man's problem because men struggle, I think, and that's my own personal belief, to realize what it is like to be discriminated if you're a woman in whatever context, because they are not in, and they don't experience it. Say, for example, now no one ever has come to me and said, you know what happened to me, this has happened, I've been discriminated because, or I've been touched inappropriately or anything. Whereas I hear from you that, you know, this happens quite a lot to you, and that is because of the gender difference, I believe, apart, and also because you're a public figure that opens up this conversation, and I'm nobody. But
you're not nobody. You're on my podcast, which means you're somebody. You had a profound effect on me, bro. So don't be putting yourself down like that.
Another thing, you remember I think it was a few years ago, there was that video of that woman that was going around with a camera and filming what was happening to her, and she was walking on the street, doing nothing, just walking on the street, not making any sort of statement, not saying anything, not doing it, just walking on the street, and she was filming how many
catcalling.
Yeah, were catcalling her. Remember that?
Yeah, she's got an Instagram account.
That is an amazing thing, right? Like, that opened up the eyes of many people, because I've never experienced that. Never. Nobody's catcalling me. I have no idea.
Make you sad, Gabriel?
It does a bit.
I promise you, bro, you can have all of mine. All of the guys that do it to me, I'd let you take it from me in a second.
Yeah, you know
it feels terrible.
Like, it's you know, it's a difference of perspective, and that's what I mean when I say we are all part of the problem, we're all part of the solution. Of course, you know, if you don't see the problem and someone's telling you, oh, men are bad because they can't call you or whatever, you don't really feel it in the bones, because you don't have the background to immediately empathize with it, because you haven't experienced that thing. It's like, say, for example, you know, I don't experience barriers because I'm not in a wheelchair as much as someone in a wheelchair does. So I don't even see it. But then, you know, you spend enough time with someone in a wheelchair and you realize how hard it is. So it is, long story short, and I shut up now, I think it is important to start this conversation. There's several degrees, and it just doesn't have to be, you know, the top end of the conversation where crimes are made or sexual predators are weeded out. Of course, these are an important part of the thing, and it needs to happen. But there's also a massive underground iceberg that needs to be talked about and changed, as it has been for other things.
Yeah, you know, someone who was on one of the panels that day came up to me afterwards and said, You know what you didn't talk about, Lee? You didn't talk about how we're supposed to approach it when there's customers being harassed by other customers. I'm like, shit, we didn't even talk about that at all. Like,
well, it's a massive topic. And I know that Kieran and my partner are talking.
Yes.
And that's, you know, an amazing thing, because they all start this conversation how to make it an industry problem. Yeah, look, I think this is the right direction to go to. I think this is the right thing to do, and I think it's not, again, just about one person or the other. Like, we don't solve the problem by finger pointing this sexual predator, this other sexual predator. We need all to, men especially, change perspective and understand that this is a big problem for everybody, not just for women. And I think a big part of it is including everyone in the conversation and the workplaces more and more and more and more. Like, you know, it don't, again, like, we don't talk disability, but, you know, what if, can we employ someone on a wheelchair? In what way? Like, you know, and I'm not saying we can't, but I'm saying, you know, these raises massive questions that usually we don't think about.
Yep. Yeah.
Because that problem doesn't happen. Like, it happens.
It's not front and center.
But it's not front and center. Exactly. Yes.
Ben and Joss, you guys had you guys have a very intense focus on culture in the way that you're building your business. And when it comes to this subject, if you had a customer that was in a situation where they were feeling uncomfortable with another customer's interactions, have you built it into your culture in how your staff should deal with something like that, how they can cue it and see what's happening and pick up on it? Or is that still something that a conversation is happening around?
I think that conversation needs to constantly be happening. We've come from the UK and from sort of pub and restaurant background, and the conversations and the training that we had was being very aware of these sorts of things and being very direct when those sort of occasions were happening to protect the customers and the teams within us. So we've brought a lot of that learning into the business that we have now, and it is something that I think, you know, starting with the culture that you have within your team and them having the antenna and the empathy and the awareness to look outside of just themselves in their role, and you know, the ambience, the comfortable feeling within the business and the vibe that they're putting out. It is important, and it's something that we do talk about in every single form. We are very aware of it. Is
it natural in your team to have conversations like that? I think that's a fascinating approach.
Ask them. I think we are very aware of. I think our team are very, very sensitive and very aware of the atmosphere within the business. They're an awesome team. So we would say, I think we would have those conversations, those debriefs, those chats afterwards, for sure. Yeah,
wow. But you don't shy away from them?
No, I mean, we're comfortable being uncomfortable, I think.
Oh, I know you've heard that somewhere before. I think everybody walked away with a few catchphrases from that thing, and that was one of the ones I kept repeating. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. Excuse me. I wanted to talk a little bit about the maps in general. Like, who thought they were useless? Excellent. That was the right question. The right answer, sorry. What did you all take away from them? Because there's a lot of effort that went into them, and we constantly hear great feedback, which is awesome, but we never hear much more other than this is amazing and we loved it. I never really get to debrief like this with anybody. So what was your thoughts on the map for any of the days?
I think as a barista, it's sort of good to have it laid out, to just have something to read with all the questions that you want to ask yourself, but you don't know. You don't know what the actual questions are. Lots of people start making coffee just as a job, and then other people start making coffee just as a job, but then realize that they actually want to take it further and they don't know where to go from there. So I think the maps are really important for people like that, and I feel like that would have really helped people in that situation. It helped me, especially with the senior year, the last map, the
pro years.
The pro years, yeah, because I'm sort of like, I'm there, but I'm also just before it. I'm kind of in between, and it was comforting to have a set of dot points of questions that I'm asking myself on a day-to-day basis now, because I know what they are, and just trying to figure out how to answer them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think from a barista's perspective, I think those maps were great. And I think that when you start a new job and you get your induction package, that something like that should be in it, you know, like when you, well, no, but it's,
I don't disagree. I think
not that specific, not like a 10-year map specifically, but, you know, in your employment contract, there should be a list of, if you actually want to work here, do you want to be like this, and this? I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
no, you are absolutely.
I think it's a great starting point for lots of people. I think it would be, yeah.
You know, on that, I'm just writing myself a note here. The reason that those maps started was because there's such a complete lack of professionalism in our industry and a complete lack of training in professionalism in our industry. And I think that the big problem that exists is that nobody knows how to approach the conversation on an industry level. And these maps are the first attempt to do that and give people kind of a career guidance effort in that. And it's been really profound to see the way that people have responded. Usually we hear from people months later saying, all right, I finally digested this shit and now I've got a bazillion questions, which is awesome. It's great. We want people to start asking those questions. I would love them to be directing them to their employers, but a lot of the time the employers don't have the answers. Like Joss and Ben have gone into the trouble of really establishing a deep-seated kind of culture and really well thought out approach to their cafes, but they're in the 0.1%. You know, like I never worked for anyone that put that kind of approach in. Maybe kind of sort of Campos did that early on in my career, but that was about it. Like it was the very early days of Campos. So yeah.
Starting, you know, the ripple and trying to get that to spread out. And I think just as an industry, if we're communicating more and talking more and networking and getting other people involved in these sorts of debates initially, and seeing how we can work it out, because you know, there is a lot of small individual operators out there that, you know, don't have the structure and the network there to help people skill up themselves. But I think looking at it from our point of view, looking at it on a human level, and trying to get people to be, you know, great humans and good people, and skill up themselves, and then if they go on and do other things elsewhere, then that's freaking awesome, you know. And we want to help support that rather than just looking at it just for your own benefit or what you initially can do yourself. But it is a big issue within our industry. We do need more professionalism, and for people to see it as a viable career and something they can actually do, and they aren't just being capped at their initial, you know, head barista level or whatever that may be. That actually there's a lot of avenues in there, because it's something that financially can be castrating to you know, how do you move on, and particularly in the current economic climate as well. What do you do? What are the next steps, and how do I go about this, and I've got this great idea in my head, and there's so many creative people. I think in the industry we have a lot of creative people that don't necessarily have the financial discipline or training to go on and do what they want to do, but so how do we take that skill level and put it into the industry
and let them flourish?
Yeah. Yes.
That's where I think that a depopulation strategy would be really great with regards to the coffee industry. I think that if we helped more, you know, that's me putting it rather dramatically, but I think you'll know what I mean. I think we need to help potentially cafe owners that shouldn't be cafe owners find an exit strategy, just so that, you know, we have a bunch of people who should be owning cafes that can't, because we have a saturated market pretty much across Australia. There's a saturated market. And I was describing this to someone last night. Think, for example, in a neighborhood, there are 15 cafes, and, you know, there's 2,000 customers in that neighborhood, and 10 of those cafes are pretty shitty cafes that just shouldn't be open. If we can help those 10 cafes close and let the people who are operating well operate, and they get to have all those customers to service them really, really well and do a good job. If we could help those 10 cafes understand that they probably should cut their losses and just move into something else, I think that would be doing the industry a favor. I just haven't figured out how we do the depopulation yet.
That happens. Like I feel like that happens naturally, though. You know.
You don't think in Melbourne that it's? I've never seen a community so saturated. It's ridiculous.
Melbourne is ridiculous, but that's what the awesome thing about Melbourne is. Like, for example, before your last trip to Melbourne, you hadn't been here in a long time, but I'm sure every single person who you asked, where do I go for coffee, they directed you to the right places, you know, to the places that are actually good to go to. And
but we're not the normal people. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we get directed to the best of the best all the time. No one's ever going to send us to a neighborhood cafe that's pretty average.
No, but even if there is a neighborhood cafe that is pretty average, that's better than the 10 others in the area, you're still going to be told to go there if you're in that area. You know, like for example, there's in Thornbury, there's lots of, here in Melbourne, there's lots of little tiny local cafes just on the side of in the middle of a street. Like, you wouldn't even know that it's there. And there's one that opened up and years ago, and it's still there, and it's in a really awkward spot where you don't really know if a lot of people would go there. And I haven't been to personally, but my auntie lives around the corner, and she goes there every single day in the morning, and she goes out of her way to go there for coffee in the morning because of how polite they are and how kind they are. And it's a husband and a wife that run it. It's just them two, and they just work so well together. And everyone that she knows locally, she brings there, and it's that sort of thing. Even though around the corner on the main road, High Street, Thornbury, there's some quite famous cafes on that street, but she still prefers to go there. You know, it's all about the word of mouth.
Yeah. And who the fuck am I to decide that 10 cafes should close out of 15? You know what I'm saying? Like,
but you are right. You are right. There are a lot of shit cafes. But you know which ones they are. Like there was I don't know if you guys recently heard about it, but I don't want to say the name of the place, but there's this one cafe in my neighborhood area that has been very, very, very successful in the last years that it's been open. One of the best. The food is immaculate, the coffee's immaculate, but there was a massive scandal. They underpaid their staff, and it hit the news, and it got really, really big. And I actually haven't gone back since, because I had a friend who worked there for a year, and he was telling me all about how horrible it actually was, like having to ask for the extra money, and the owners were like, no, you're like, why would we give you extra money? This is what you're worth, sort of thing. And I haven't gone back there because I don't want to support that. And that's just me. And I know a lot of people, and I've told them to not go there, sort of thing. And I don't know if they're still doing as well as they did, but it hit the news, and Melbourne's huge. So I'm sure it would have done some damage to their business.
For sure.
Yeah. And that happens all the time. It even happened in the city recently on De Grave Street. I'm sure some of you guys would have heard or read or watched any videos about it online. There was a massive protest done down one of the main roads in the city of all these cafes. All these employees got together and protested because they did a survey that over 52% of the businesses on De Grave Street in Melbourne were underpaying their staff.
Fuck.
Yeah. And
how do you get away with it these days, given like 90% of business is done electronically? Like it's all on card. I don't know how you'd get away with it. What is it on De Grave Street? Is it all cash businesses?
I believe, well, I actually worked on De Grave Street for 2 years when I was younger, and I was getting paid I was actually getting paid legally, but that was because I was young and they could pay me less.
Yeah.
But I know from my experience that most of those cafes there on that street, and even businesses, not even just cafes, they hire foreigners who don't know any different, and they pay them cash, and the foreigners come thinking that, you know, $14 an hour is good money, and they get away with it, and then 3 months later they have a whole new team because those people realize that it's shit and they're getting underpaid, so they leave. But it's so easy to just get new people coming in, like it's just all the foreigners pretty much that work down that street. And it's not just me saying that, like it's a very, very multicultural street. Like there are some restaurants you go to and your waitresses can literally not speak a word of English to you, but they can communicate the menu and everything. They just can't tell you everything. If you ask them a question, they have to go get someone else. And they're the ones who are getting underpaid because they get away with it. What was that? Sorry?
Which is an amazing thing. I wanted to say that, you know, it's important that we value diversity, and it's important that we say that. Yeah, I just wanted to point. I know that you think that, but I want. No,
it's great. I've worked with I can't even tell you, people from all around the world, and it's the best because that's the greatest thing about hospitality. It's everywhere in the world. It's the exact same thing. It's all about making people happy and you know, whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but
awesome, Eleni.
But I think in Melbourne, in populated areas where there's lots of tourism, they take advantage of the poor foreigners who come here on their 12-month working visas and have to just find a job for those 6 months, because then they have to move on to another job in the next 6 months. And business owners take advantage of that, and they say, you can work for us for 6 months. Here's $15 cash in hands, you know, and they overwork them, you know. And these foreigners don't know what penalty rates are. They don't know what overtime is. They don't know any of that. And then when they soon figure it out, this business owner has already hired a whole new lot of people to work.
Correct.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. I just don't know how they can still get away with it, given that so many businesses are no longer cash. Like, sure, we all got paid cash at one point or another in our careers, and it was all under the table, but that was 10 years ago when people were doing massive amounts of their business in cash. These days, I think there's only 10% now, something around that figure of cash. So
I still believe that bribing is a big thing in the tax industry here, but that's just me. I have my own theories. Even like I love it. I do. I believe it because I know businesses where they employ people with Australian residency and put them in the books by a certain amount of people. So if you've got a team of 10 people, you put all the employees who are residents in the book so they get paid normally, but then all the other people get paid under the table. But in the books, on the records, it looks all legal because you've got a substantial amount of people who are legally getting paid. So they don't look at that. They don't actually see you have 10 people.
Yeah.
That happens.
Just thinking about it, I probably shouldn't have admitted on a public podcast that I got paid cash and the ATO. It was over 7 years ago, so don't bother. You can't audit me on that stuff anymore. Just saying, ATO. I live in another country now anyway, so.
And it was only 25 days, right?
And it was, just a week. That's all. It wasn't anything. It wasn't anything.
Just say you were volunteering. It's fine. Whatever.
Look, this one's got solutions as well. Go you.
Yeah.
If what was of the discussions that we had, what do you think is the most? What do you think are the things that you want to dig deeper into with regards to the stuff that we talked about at the workshops? Because we spoke about culture, we spoke about strategy. Al Keating spoke about that strategy about opening a cafe. I talked about all the maps and professionalism and all of that. We had the discussions about running out of coffee. That's something that I really want to talk about. How did that discussion affect you guys?
It was very interesting to have so many people up on the panel and their very different opinions on where things are at. And I don't know how it was in Sydney, but in Melbourne it was pretty impressive pretty powerful actually. I've got to say, like, we've all got our own sort of coffee purchasing culture, and we have one thing and aspire to another. I think from our perspective, it's definitely put clarity in the direction we want to head. We want this to be a sustainable industry. And very quickly going back on the sustainability of the industry in the last question, was that, you know, conspiring to each other's success is like super important, and pointing out the bad ones is obviously tough. But I think we've all got to work together to support each other so that industry can grow, because education is the key thing here. I think that's what's lacking for a lot of business owners, a lot of operators that have power and don't necessarily have the right reasoning for their decision making. But I mean, look, Nick and I especially, Nick's our head roaster at the moment, and we've spent a lot of time talking about what we want to do as a philosophy for green coffee purchasing. It's just about trying to find the right way to fit that into a viable financial model that makes it like impactful, you know, because it's a big thing. But it was definitely inspiring to hear probably some of the biggest people in the industry over the last 10 years talk about it.
And I think just following up on that, the big take-home thing for us was just there were so many conversations where everyone is having their own, an identical conversation in their own places, but actually getting everyone together and finding a solution or just discussing these things hasn't really sort of happened in an organic format, and it really is starting that. And then and how important that is that we, you know, work together and we do celebrate each other's success and be positive and help support each other rather than trolling other people or
Yes.
to bring someone else down. It isn't done enough, and I think we can all collaborate and contribute towards that initially, first and foremost.
You know, and I think an important element to that formula is not being scared of the difficult side of the conversations. You know, an interesting thing happened. I know I'm pretty sure you all know that I was delayed in Australia because of a visa hiccup. And as soon as, so it was over a week I was delayed, and I kept, as soon as it happened, as soon as they turned me away at the airport, I'm like, right, there's a reason, and I'm just going to have to wait to see what it is. And it revealed itself on the Wednesday night. After that, I was at a panel discussion, and it happened in Sydney. It was organised by Mark Dundon, and it was a discussion around pretty much that discussion, you know, are we running out of coffee? And they had some pretty impressive people on the panel. And the thing that I guess disappointed me about the discussion was, and this was discussed after the panel finished in the audience, was nobody was talking about the warts of that discussion. Whereas the people in the panel that we had at Map Forward were very brave in talking about sex trafficking and slavery and poverty and all of this dark side of the coffee industry that exists, and they wanted to bring forward and talk about it, and they didn't hide from that. And I think moving forward, we as an industry have to be very aware that there are some, in all of these difficult conversations that we have, we've got to kind of, again, there's that phrase, sit in the discomfort of it and be comfortable in the fact that unless we start confronting the discomfort or the uncomfortable parts of these discussions, we're not going to fix anything. And I was really disappointed that that conversation I went to, something huge and massive that I can't talk about publicly yet, came out of that that situation, and it's going to be enormous, and I'm very happy that I went to that. But I was disappointed that we weren't having that conversation more honestly outside of the Map Forward forum. And I think I'd like to find a way that we could make this conversation more public outside of our industry. And I don't know that we solved any of the problems of it in that conversation that we had. I'd love to hear how you'll talk about these problems to your customers, to your co-workers. Does anyone have anything on that? Did anyone think about how they might change their approach in the way that they discuss that publicly?
I think it's a really exceptionally hard thing to approach, in that generally people engage emotionally. We could state facts and figures of how many people are getting harassed in how many coffee shops across the world, however many times you want, and people aren't going to believe it or engage with it. It's always going to be anecdotes and emotional pleas to the heart that are going to actually move people, which I think almost necessitates people who have been in these god-awful situations sharing them and explaining that these things have happened. And here is me as an actual human being that you like and respect, telling you that this has happened to me in these awful ways. That's what's moved me the most throughout the years. I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, is, say, an issue we don't really care about. It just doesn't touch us. We can't relate to it until a loved one turns around to us and says, okay, well, how about me? I've done this has happened to me, and I can tell you that it's awful and these things happen. And suddenly it becomes real. It's no longer just facts on a spreadsheet anymore. It is real, and it's happened to someone that you care about. And suddenly you're thinking about it. All we need to do is communicate more and be thoughtful. It's just how we can encourage people to do those things. And I think getting people to engage emotionally with the issue is the best way to do that. But it's a hard thing. It would require a lot of very, very brave people sharing the horrible things that they've gone through.
Actually, I have a question on that. If somebody did do that, if somebody in the industry, read between the lines here, but if someone in the industry did go ahead and start to show very graphically the warts that are going on at Origin, how would you all take that if you started seeing that in the press?
That'd be very powerful. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, of course.
Go ahead, Lenny.
Oh, I think it'd be very powerful footage. I think it's just the reason why it hasn't happened yet is the same reason why people don't like watching things, like watching the wars that are still happening around the world, you know? Or like it's the reason why people don't voluntarily go onto Google and search all about sexual harassment and all that sort of thing. Like people don't want to watch that stuff, and they're afraid to put that information online. You know, I would watch it. I think it would be so powerful that it would be enough to make people, to influence people and to do whatever they can to help change what's happening.
I disagree, if I may.
Yeah, please go.
Oh, that's fine. Go, just yeah.
Sorry, I think you know, it comes from a very good place, but I think because it is a very complex issue, and full of different perspectives, I think what, you know, if you put it out there, there are some people who will take a positive approach to it and will see that you know, that they find other way to source the beans or to, you know, address that whatever problem it is. But the bulk of the population will see that there is a problem and either not do much about it, talk about it for a few days, and then move on. I think, and that's not saying that it shouldn't happen, like, you know, it shouldn't be exposed or anything. But as Connor, I think, was saying, I think I agree with, you know, his perspective on how people respond emotionally when they're connected emotionally to an issue. But I don't think that exposing some of the issues would be in itself a solution. Say, for example, you know, how global warming has been around for decades and decades, and we have all seen, you know, different documentaries and universities' papers about it and all that kind of stuff, but very, very little has been done. Yeah, just food for thoughts. I don't think so. What I'm saying is that I don't think it is the solution. I think it's part of the solution. It can be part of the solution, but I don't think it will be in itself the silver bullet.
What do you think, Will? Do you have any ideas on that?
On releasing.
Yeah, if we were to, that was not an admission that it's going to be me. Just pretend I didn't say that. But if there was some footage that got out there of like all the warts that are going on in the coffee at Origin, let's just say.
Yeah,
how do you think that would go?
No, I think it would go well in the sense that the people who aren't aware, they'd become more aware of these issues. I mean, as Gabriele said, like, I don't think it's going to be a solution, but it will definitely bring up conversation and awareness on the issue. And the issue, you know, it's a big issue at the moment.
So you don't think that if we being a whole industry, were to release some footage that showed people that what goes on at the farms that grow coffee, that go into their insert instant coffee name company here, you don't think that would turn people away from wanting to contribute to that economy?
No, I think it would definitely turn people away from wanting to support, I guess, or buy those products, just because a lot of people, I think, would care about those things. And if they were seeing what actually is happening, then they wouldn't be wanting to like associate or partner or, you know, support something that that's happening. So I guess in that sense, yes, I think it'd be really, you know, productive to release or show what's actually happening.
Okay. Now, Carlos, you come from a coffee producing family, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. So your family has farms in Colombia and whatnot. And you actually were quite surprised at some of the things that I was saying that people had told me about with regards to the things that go on at Origin, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I think we all know that every coffee industry in each country changes quite a lot. But I would say in Colombia, sex trafficking or stuff like that, that does not happen. And answering your question about like how the people would react if someone starts showing up stuff that happens around the world. It's a personal opinion. I find it more effective at doing to change those conditions, and I think that gets more people behind a project that is changing something, is helping women and origin, kids, changing that kind of stuff, instead of showing all the bad things that happen. And just to create awareness, people would get behind a campaign. I totally hear and believe lots of things that happen that are not quite okay or positive, but I also know there are lots of good things that companies are doing in Origin and changing a situation for farmers. I know the conditions of Colombian farmers, and I do know the impact that a specialty company in regions, in isolated regions in Colombia, where there's no help from the government or from anything, and those companies do social projects and fund lots of good things. So, personal opinion, I think working on the good things that people are doing would get more people behind those kind of. But I do understand that awareness should be generated in consumer content.
Carlos, I had a comment. Oh, did you all hear that feedback? That was intense. I'm sorry about that. Carlos, I interestingly had a conversation with about what you and I had spoken about afterwards with regards to the fact that it's your opinion that sex trafficking and all this stuff doesn't go on in Colombia. And this person had some strong opinions that disagreed with what you said. And I found that really interesting. I'm going to put you and her in contact so that you can probably get some greater insight into what she has observed. And the only reason I say that is because I find it fascinating that we can exist in a community and perhaps not necessarily know everything that's going on within that community. I was quite shocked to hear some of the things that she told me that she had observed that went on in Colombia. Only because I had already spoken to you when you had told me that it doesn't happen there. So I'll make sure that I put you guys in contact.
I would love to hear. Yeah,
yeah, and I think it's important that we all stay open to the idea. And I think that was the big thing that I was trying to achieve with Map It Forward is, yes, conspiring to each other's success. Yes, getting comfortable with the discomfort. Yes, with starting conversations and knowing how to ask questions. But more than anything, this idea of I want to learn new shit constantly. I want to be open to what is going on outside of what I know is going on. And I hope that we kind of came close to achieving that with what we did. But I certainly walked away mind-fucked by some of the stories that green buyers were telling me after those panel discussions. And it really did blow me away with regards to that side of things. Sasha, I know you've been, right?
Sorry, you just broke up a little.
Sorry. So you've worked at Origin, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. How did the discussion, because you were on the panel for Are We Running Out of Coffee? And how did that discussion affect the way that you saw things? How did you think that conversation went?
Well, I see that question as incredibly complex because it's so multifaceted. And this is some of the stuff that I spoke about on the panel, which was there was a lot of sort of I guess a lot of highlight on climate change, which is obviously a growing factor for the future, but also sort of there's also just supply and demand and looking at how the economy works and understanding sort of the trends that have existed over the last 20 years in coffee. And I think that we sort of come down and sort of think, oh, okay, cool, well, I can just do this sort of one thing and that's going to help. Or if I just buy this, really high grade coffee and pay a good price for that coffee, that I'm doing a good thing with. And you forget about the entire, I guess the entirety of what it is. And one of the things that I spoke about was so let's just say you wanted to go to a plantation or a farmer, and I hear a lot of this is oh, well, I bought all his coffee. And I hear a lot of people saying this oh, and we paid, amazing money. I'm well, no, you actually bought all of his best coffee or all of, their best coffee. But you wouldn't have bought their chips and their broken beans and their screen size 14s and their screen size 15s because, if you're a specialty roasting company, perhaps you had no use for that. And I can tell you that I was working on a specialty plantation producing, amazing coffee that was sort of sold worldwide. But as a natural consequence of farming, you have chips, you have screen size 14, you have a lot of brokens that make up a lot of coffee that still needs to be sold. So I don't think it's the answer to just say, oh, well, I paid, X dollar for that farmer's, best crop and I took the, the cherry on the top of the cake. And what I'm not mentioning, or what we're not discussing, is what happens to the rest of the coffee that makes up a huge amount of still what they produce that they need to sell. Like, is that okay then to, put that on the exchange, or that they get nothing for? Or do we have some sort of responsibility to be nurturing the entirety of coffee production, particularly if we're working direct trade or with farmers and trying to, get all that coffee from a particular farmer,
Do we have a responsibility, Sasha, do you think?
Yeah.
What can we do with that coffee? And I'm playing devil's advocate here. I actually don't know what we could do with that coffee, but we can't roast it in a way that's going to be able to be used in what we do, because it's not going to roast evenly. So what would we do with it?
Well, I don't know exactly what you do with it if you were sort of like limited, like if you were a roaster, and this is just sort of throwing something out there off the top of my head, but if you're a roaster, so we hear a lot of like, direct trade, where it's sort of like roaster trying to go to farmer, right? And we're forgetting about that, and everybody's like, what does that even mean anymore? And that's a probably whole discussion. But what's more important is talking about like direct relationships. And that doesn't necessarily have to be roaster to farmer. That could be through merchants and so many people who work in the area. And so when we sort of say, well, what could we do? Well, as a roaster, if you are purely just a specialty coffee roaster, and then you have a limited market. So if I have one type of customer, and if I'm a specialty coffee roaster, selling a specialty product, then more than likely I only have specialty cafes who only want X grade of coffee. So if I'm going to that farmer and I'm saying, well, hey, I want to buy all your coffee because I want to be unique and I don't want anybody else to have your coffee, so I'm going to pay you X amount for this stuff. Then he's only left with, or that farmer's only left with, all this stuff that they then have to move. And so you're not actually helping that farmer. But what a merchant could do, or what a green buyer could do, they actually could move all of that coffee. So if you were to move through like a merchant or a larger green buyer who bought all of their good stuff, and you were sort of to buy off that, they could also work out an arrangement to buy their other stuff, because they have a wider scope of customer that then they could move. They could sort of pay a reasonable price and probably move that through other channels because they have multiple customers. So sometimes sort of just being like, oh, I work direct trade with this farmer, but I only took his, or all their best stuff, isn't really like solving the problem of trying to help out farmers on every level. And I think there's sort of a bit of a misunderstanding of like from the consumer level that like even farmers who are producing like the best coffee in the world, like it's just like I said, it's a natural consequence of farming. You're not going to have, not all your coffee is going to be amazing. So we do need to, think about that, or, because that makes up a huge part of their livelihood.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything that they want to add to that? I see Gabriele reaching in there.
Hi. I just wanted, totally agree. I just wanted to say maybe we need to get smarter and find new things to do with the coffee that we wouldn't touch, because we need to be more sustainable as an industry. I think it's important, and I think, and I'm putting this on you, Lee, I think you as a leader of this new movement that you have created are in the perfect spot to create this conversation happen. Because it is an important conversation to have. Like we will run out of coffee at some point.
Well, the interesting thing is we don't know if we're going to run out of coffee. And we may or we may not. The thing that I've definitely come out of these 2 weekends, especially with the conversations around that panel discussion, is no one's got a definitive answer. It was quite a polarizing conversation. Some people were like, yes, we're absolutely going to run out of coffee. And other people were like, we're never going to fucking run out of coffee because, there's climate change that's happening, and we may shift the different countries that we will grow coffee in, but we will never actually run out of coffee because, and hello, China, you've entered the race and you're growing lots of coffee now too. I think that, yes, I have started a conversation, and I'm not going to stop the conversation, and I'm going to be dragging more people into it and holding them accountable. And we have a few things up our sleeve that are going to happen over the next couple of years that are probably going to cause a big ruckus in the media. And I've taken that on board, and I have an agenda with that. And my agenda is that at the end of the day, whatever coffee we are planting on this planet, I want it to be sustainable. I want it to not hurt the planet, and I want it not to hurt the people that are involved in every part of the supply chain. And so I want people to be paid fairly, but I want people to be treated well as well, based on what they determine to be well, not based on what we as a Western society deems to be treated well. So if a family wants to have their children working in their coffee farm with them, and that's acceptable from a cultural perspective, who the fuck am I to tell people that they're not allowed to have their children working on the coffee farm that they're going to inherit, because this is the way that they want to teach their children how to be coffee farmers into the future. You know, that's, I want to be very mindful of that. It's something that I learnt at these 2 weekends that we did in Sydney. It's like, hey, lady, who the fuck do you think you are to impose what you decide is child labor onto a family who's trying to, like, put coffee in their kids' blood so that this becomes second nature to them when they come to inherit a farm. But at the same time, on the other side of it, you have pickers who are being paid next to nothing and sex trafficked just so that they can actually make a living, and that's not okay. And we want to find a way to address a very complex issue without adding to the colonialism side of it. I'm very aware of that, and I don't want to be that asshole either. But it is a very difficult conversation to have, and you know, I've carving out a reputation for myself of not being scared of having those conversations, and I'm fine with that. But I want to have the right conversation, and I want to have it with the right people.
I think, you know, being entrepreneurial is the answer in this, because we need to find, in my own opinion, when I say, you know, we run out of coffee, we will run out of coffee, I agree with you when you say, oh, it's uncertain. But what I know is that we can't all have the best bit forever, because it's not sustainable, and it creates a lot of issues. I think, you know, finding another way to consume coffee, which isn't specialty coffee or whatever it is, it's an important part of the conversation. So what do we do with the coffee that we otherwise wouldn't buy, and how can we make it specialty?
An interesting thing that has come out of a few of the discussions that we had, we're going to be trying to get some technology put together around this. So without saying too much, there is going to be some technology that we're going to start working on with a few different parties. I'm choosing my words carefully, but we're working on them with a few different parties to help address this situation, so that when we do actually approach affecting change, it's done in a way that actually does something rather than just pretends to do something. I'm not a fan of that behavior. There's no point in saying we're trying to fix this problem if we're doing fuck all. So, you know, when people say, and we've spoken about it on this podcast before, that we want to get some transparency models in there. We want to find a way, whether it be through blockchain technology or through a global database or whatever it is, some place that's a repository for information that other people can go and have a look at. And so when people say to me, but what are you trying to achieve with doing that? That's a great question. We need to figure out what we need to achieve with that before we actually do it. So I want to take a lot longer in the planning phases for all of this stuff than necessarily just saying, oh, cool, we've got some developers who really love coffee that want to go and create something that's going to change the world. No, but wait, let's make sure that we've clearly defined a lot of the things, if not all of the things that we need for this to do and create the complex system that we need, perhaps they need to be independent for each origin. But let's go about the business of doing it, even if it's independent for different regions of the world, because the way that the data that's collected for coffees that are grown in Central America is very different to the data that's collected and tracked in East Africa. And so my thinking is that if we are going to create a solution around this, they're going to be independent systems, but we don't know. And we also want to know what kind of flow-on effect and byproduct we want to give the rest of the world, whether it be the specialty industry or whether it be the coffee consuming public or whether it be the commodity market. Like, how do we fulfill all the stakeholders' needs through something like this? And I think that we're probably going to need a few more Map It Forward workshops before we understand what the industry needs, because it just seems so hard to get everyone together to discuss something like this. Perhaps some surveys need to go out or whatnot, but it's a super complex conversation. I didn't realize, well, I knew it was complex, but I didn't realize how many people have such opposing views on it before we had the panel discussions. So it was intense, to say the least. We've hit kind of close to about 2 hours, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're getting closer to 2 hours. I wanted to ask you guys what you want future discussions to be about when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'd love to start a conversation around that, because you know, we're starting to figure out who we're going to invite as speakers next year in Australia, and if we do end up taking it to Milan. But what are some discussions that you would like approached next year when we do this? I think I've stumped all of you. No, that's fine. Is there something that you want more of then?
Liv.
Yes, Carlos.
Something that I've seen in the specialty coffee industry.
Sorry, Carlos, try that again.
Something, can you hear me there?
Yes.
Yep. Something I have seen in the specialty coffee industry in Australia is there's lots of competition between roasters, and there is a kind of attitude, not official, but there is a kind of attitude of the best and what others do is not, and stuff like that. So it would be awesome if there can be panels about cooperation, not between farms, but between roasters, between competitors. What I say is, and it was a topic that I just left in the air in one of the panels, and it was specialty coffees is still a very, very small part of the coffee industry. And instead of competing to each other in the same small portion of that, the whole industry should be working to get more of the total, the big pie. So anyway, we can get, I don't know, speakers to talk about the ideas. I don't have them. I don't have the idea to get specialty coffee roasters to work together, but I don't know. I would love to see that kind of topic, at least being these different opinions and what we can do or why not, something like that.
I'm definitely going to put that down, Carlos. I think we'll title that talk "Taking Specialty Coffee Mainstream." I have already got about 15 people I want to invite to speak on that panel. That's a really great suggestion. you know, I think I have some ideas that I'm working with some people on about how we can actually make this happen. So inviting a lot of those people onto these panels would be fantastic, because we need to stop spending money on fucking the latest espresso machine, and we need to start spending more money on marketing and bringing more people to actually drink specialty coffee and not engage in shitty coffee practices. So I really like that. Thank you. What about the rest of y'all? Do you have any ideas of what are some things that you'd like to speak some more about next year, or new ideas for conversations that you would like to hear about?
I think the culture, it's establishing the culture within a business was such a strong message. Jared was awesome with what he talked about, but I think a lot of what the subjects we've spoken about today, everything starts with the culture that is created, whether it's positive or negative, and supporting and growing positive culture, and also if you're in a negative one, how you make that change to adjust it and to challenge negative or incorrect culture there. But certainly in our business, that is imperative that everyone plays their part in there. And I don't just think within a cafe or a small business, but also as an industry, we need to look at that. And what are one of the ways to create that, because it's something that sometimes you know when you go into a place of work where there is a good culture there, but you don't always know necessarily how to change it and how to adjust it, and tools to equip you to be able to make that stronger and build that. I think it would be really useful.
Yeah, I like that idea. I'm thinking next year of actually bringing in a cultural expert, someone who is actually a consultant in building cultures in workplaces, and does that across different industries, because I think it'd be great for us to hear from someone who goes into corporations and takes the culture that already exists and builds on that, and have them give us some definitive different ways that they do those kinds of things. So I love that, Ben. Thank you. What about Connor? Yes.
Sorry, just to tie in, it is closely related to culture, but having a bit of a focus on mental health. I mean, I'm sure we've all been there. We've all come close to or have burned out in this industry. Some of us have bounced back into it. But there are so many bad industry practices, so many expectations that aren't sustainable within the industry, that I think having a talk about what represents good practice in terms of maintaining your own mental health well-being in the workplace and for your members of staff, and even how you can create a dialogue around the mental health of our customers. I think we are on the front lines, and we've got the whole of humanity bringing their problems through our doors, and sometimes we have to deal with them, and we've got a lot of people who have zero training in how to handle someone who is having a hard time. We don't know how to help them, we don't know how to console them, and God forbid they are having a psychotic break or something of a similar kind. We have zero way of handling that. So maybe just a conversation to lay down some foundations on how we can help ourselves to help each other in mental health.
I like that. Yeah. And Jamie tried to address some of that in his talk when he was talking about mindset, but poor guy, we gave him an hour to talk about something that he usually speaks on for a day, and then had to extend the hour because it simply wasn't enough. But he's going to be coming with us across the whole tour next year. So I'm definitely going to get him to speak about that for sure. What about the financial stuff that we spoke about? Was that helpful?
Very much so.
Yeah?
I feel like more detail would probably be more beneficial. I mean, he's a very good guy, just reading his book at the moment. So his points were great. I just don't feel we spent enough time in the owner day probably talking about that. I think it's really financial viability. It's all down to, it's so important. So yeah, I feel like that's the backbone of probably a bit more content.
No, I hear you on that for sure.
I completely agree. And if I may, how to sort of financially tying in the other issues as well. So not the other issues, but the other aspects that have been brought into the conversation, like, you know, culture, how, you know, having a focus into culture can have an impact in the finance, and how much and how that can be absorbed because of what Jared was talking about, that, you know, down the track that will pay off. And you know, saying that as a burden at the beginning, but then, you know, that will pay off because of what you create and all that kind of stuff. I think the finance stuff is really good. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That's.
I think there's something on the Barista Day as well, learning the impact you can have on the business that you work for. You know, whether it's adding value by an additional item, how, you know, financially that can make a difference, and the impact of just that small additional sale, or you know, getting customers to come back, you know, twice a week rather than once a week, and getting them to just see how your small part can have such a big impact to the business and the business owner, and therefore, you know, they're here then tomorrow, and what your little difference can make. Because I think it's quite hard to see it at the front line necessarily when you're just in your little zone, but actually it can be very powerful when you start. We did it with a company I used to work for, where, you know, that small over pouring on milk and what financially that can do to the business, or you know, not wasting that extra cup, or just small little changes. Yep. Those can be very powerful, big impacts across your business, as small as it may be.
I hear you, and that was what we were going for with regards to, like, breaking down the cost of a cup of coffee and showing people that, you know, the profit margin in a cup of coffee when it's being sold for $4 for a latte, you know, it's 17 cents. Based on real number averages, and showing people that at 17 cents, if they drop a stack of cups and have to throw those cups in the bin, that's pretty much removed the profit that was being made from the equivalent number of cups that were made by the barista that were sold, you know. So I definitely hear you on that, and we need a lot more of a deep dive in that. It's something that we spoke at length about on the workshop that we ran last Thursday for baristas. It was a 3-hour deep dive into the map. And we spoke at length about, you know, funding their own pay rise and learning how to sell, and understanding relationship selling, profit margins, what impact they can have just by taking too long on doing different things. And, you know, you think about it and you're like, this is the kind of stuff that we hope we can get to a point with employers that they're teaching their staff, but we're a long ways off from something like that. I wish we weren't, but I really wish that any of my employers had said to me, hey, listen, so this is how much it costs. This is how much profit we make on a cup of coffee. If someone was able to show me that when I was a barista, I feel like it would have gone a long way to helping me understand the impact I was having on a business. But I definitely feel you on that. What about with regards to financials? How many of you care about the financials related to green bean? Because we didn't touch on that at all during these workshops. Like, how many of you would want to know more about that?
For sure.
Yep. Okay.
I think it's important. It's definitely important. Should be spoken about.
Many with regards to green. What would you want to know? Would you want to know, like what interests you about that stuff? What do you care about? Do you want to know the difference between farm gate and FOB? Like, does all the numbers in the supply chain matter to you, or is it just that you want to know the difference between if I was to buy the green and roast it myself versus just buying roasted coffee, and how I can get a better price on that? What are the kinds of things?
All of the above.
Okay.
I think
that's fair.
Interesting, because like I don't know much about green bean buying personally.
Okay.
So it would benefit me in that sense.
Eleni, as a barista, do you have an interest in knowing about these other elements of the industry, and do you think it will affect your career at this point?
Yes, for me personally, yes, because I eventually want to become a business owner, and so for me now is the time to learn everything and to just gather as much information as I can to help me be successful later on.
Yeah, great. Okay, because we're thinking of inviting a green buyer to be one of the speakers at next year's panel, and they're able to talk about, I mean, fuck, the number of subjects that we could have them talk about. But I think I'd specifically want them to talk about a career as a green buyer and what impact that can have for cafe owners, baristas and roasters. So I think
that would be awesome. Our green bean buyer for St. Ali has done a few talks like that within the company and has invited people to come and join and listen to her speak about it. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I think it would be awesome to get it involved with Map It Forward.
That's Lucy Ward, right?
Yeah.
I did invite Lucy to be on one of the panels, but she was not in the country when we were going to be in Melbourne.
Brazil.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm very much looking to meeting that badass. The number of people that have said to me, you've got to get Lucy Ward involved in Map It Forward. I'm like, I would if we could actually be in the same country at the same time.
I reckon she'd be super keen.
Awesome.
She's pretty great.
I'm just taking a bazillion notes here. Sorry if I look like I'm not paying attention to anybody. What other things do you all want to hear about? Do we want to hear more about the gender inequality? Do we want to hear about diversity? Do we want to hear about... So here's a thought. I was thinking of talking about leadership and management. Not me personally, but bringing some people to come in and teach people about how to be great leaders. Does anyone think that that's relevant?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
100%.
Awesome. You know, and just talking about like leadership and management structures. And so from an organizational structure perspective, what are some of the different ways that you could set up and this links into culture, how do you set up the leadership so that it adequately reflects the culture? Some people want to have a kind of a flat structure with regards to leadership. Others are staunch on a hierarchical kind of approach. And I think just being able to talk about the different kinds of options with regards to leadership might be helpful for people.
I think it would be interesting if we got to hear if we got to hear what business owners had to say about their business from different levels of, like if we got someone who owned a franchise, a cafe franchise, someone who owned a chain of cafes, not specifically like a franchise, like the same company, but like chains. And then someone who owns like a micro store, like a tiny 2-person store, or someone who owns a small business, like getting a group of people who do the same thing but on a different scale, talk about differences and similarities and that kind of thing. I think that could be interesting.
I think I agree with you. Sorry, a panel about different approaches to leadership.
And it'd be good because it's different perspectives.
Franchise.
Lee.
Yes.
There was someone in Sydney, I don't remember his name. The last day he mentioned a great event. We had professionals in management, in psychology, in leadership, in all these areas, and that is amazing. But really good question, saying we didn't have a producer, and having the point of view of the producer here. We are talking about the coffee industry, listening to everyone else in the chain, but we are not listening from first-hand opinion about produce. So that would be cool. I'm not sure how we can integrate in all the days, but maybe a panel or maybe something. I just
yeah.
and,
I hear you on that, because that person actually came up to me and sought me out and wanted to have an argument with me about it, which is always fun. Always the best way to communicate with someone is to start an argument with them about, you know, you're clearly not doing enough to support the industry, Lee, because you don't have producers represented on the day. Always love that. But I hear what you're saying. My only thing about that, and I have been thinking about it, is what do you all want to hear from them about? How to plant coffee, what their frustrations are, or what their challenges, like what is it that you all would want to know from them so that I can find the right producers? I have access to the producers, that's not a problem. But I need to know that if we're going to go to the trouble of taking them away from their farms, that we're going to be giving, because I'm not a fan of just having a producer there for the sake of having a producer there. Fuck that. If I'm going to go to the trouble of removing them from their farm or inviting them to come over from their farm and have them move away from their work for, you know, a couple of weeks, I need to understand what people want to learn from these people that they couldn't get from a podcast.
Maybe it would be the starting point of questions about what we can do with all the quantity of coffee that is not specialty. Explaining how hard for them is, okay, thank you very much, specialty coffee people and roasters, for buying the 10% of my production. But I just want to be here to tell you I have the remaining 90% sold at this, or sometimes not even sold. Sometimes I don't know what I can do with that. What we can do about it, and then again, maybe we are not gonna get solutions in there. But like gender equality, we are not gonna get a solution, but it's a starting point. And if it is not in spaces like that, maybe we will never get a solution on the topic.
Yep. No, I hear you. And look, I think that there are, you know, some things that I know that are going to be breaking in the press and whatnot around the coffee industry. I think that what that producer might be able to talk about is going to become more apparent over the next 6 months. It would just be about making sure that we could find the right kind of thing that we could get them to talk about that would be valuable to them as well as to the audience. I don't know what I just broke, but I broke something. It's fine. But yeah, and if you guys do think more on that, on what we would be able to have a producer talk about, I'd love to have someone, but I don't want to have someone just for the sake of being able to say, because we do this a lot in our industry, oh, let's get someone from a poor country to come and talk and make all of us feel really comfortable about what we've done. I don't want to be the asshole. You know, I want them to get a lot out of it. I want us to get a lot out of it. I want it to be an experience that we can all kind of go away and think from. I think it would be more valuable for a bunch of us to go to Origin and kind of take a look at what's going on in their environment rather than have them come into our environment and have to tell us about what's going on. But I definitely think that it could be valuable as long as we don't waste anyone's time.
What I would like to know from the producers is, how do I make the choice and how do I support the people that I want to support? As in, how do I support the producers? By buying coffee.
Okay.
And yeah, that kind of stuff. Like, because you know, I am very lucky and I've got the choice of a million beautiful beans to choose from, but how do I vote with my money?
With your money. Okay. That's, you know, we're getting there. I've got a couple of people in mind that are well versed on the supply chain from a bunch of different origins. And one of them in particular is a woman who grows coffee. Another couple of guys are on coffee. Their family owns a coffee farm, and they also sell coffee here in the States. So they're based in the States, and their mum owns a farm in Guatemala. So perhaps they would be the perfect guys to come and talk about the whole supply chain, and they deal in commodity as well as specialty coffee. So they're the kind of guys who we might be able to bring on board so they can have very frank discussions about that. That's helping me figure out where we could go with that. So I appreciate that. Is there anything else anyone would want to hear about next year? Yeah, go ahead, Gabriele.
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot. There are a couple of things that I wrote down, apart from the ones that we touched on. I guess I'll pick one and I'll go with that. I'd like to. I pick two. Can I pick two?
Sure.
So dreaming, I'd like to have some hands-on activities to do, especially around culture and all leadership styles and leadership talk, like some activity that we do together in the day and sort of bring on, I don't know, how do we relate to each other? How do we communicate? How do do things together as a team, and with a structure, and how to positively cooperate.
Reinforce. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
I'm not sure how you would implement that, but it's like a dream that I think could have worked well. Also, because sorry about this.
Sure. You've got some drag racing going on in the background there.
Yeah, because also like it will bring us together as an audience and create a sense
Yep.
of community together and that kind of stuff. Also, another thing that I wanted to mention is that sort of touches on the gender equality stuff is talking about diversity and inclusion, and maybe having some professional talk about diversity and inclusion. We got, in our own little bubble, big problem with that, and we need to fix it because we are quite a very we all look alike, right? Or there is very little diversity, let's say that, and that brings on discrimination and many other problems. So how do we include other people?
Awesome.
And now I shut up for you.
No one needs you to shut up. It's a podcast. We don't need anyone shutting up. That's the exact opposite of what a podcast should be. Connor, do you have any suggestions on some stuff you'd like to hear about next year?
Again, beyond, I really do agree with the argument that we should have more of a touch on culture. I mean, that makes sense, seeing as I represent cafe culture. It is so crucial. I think it is at the heart of so many things we can improve within the industry. If we start with the culture, it promotes more open dialogue, which helps us to handle every other issue. So I loved what Jared had to say. I'm sure there are other people out there who have equally powerful insight. And again, I think we should continue fighting the good fight on inequality within the industry and other similar issues. It was a powerful conversation, and it should become a cornerstone, I think.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Sasha? Sasha, can you hear me? We can't hear you, darling. Hello? Oh, I've gone. Can anyone hear me? You can hear me. Can anyone say something? Because I can't hear anyone.
Blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay, I can hear all of you. I just can't hear Sasha. Okay. Because you'll put your mute on all at once. And oh, Sasha. Maybe pull your headphones out, darling. Have they maybe gone? There we go.
There we go.
We can
Am I
hear you
back
now.
on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think they're all awesome points. I definitely love the the inequality stuff, because I think that's just the beginning. And I think there's so much more that can be done with that. I love the idea of having an expert. I think it needs it. I agree with Carlos. I love the idea of a producer as well. And I also agree with what you said, Lee. You've got to be careful that you don't exploit producers and you're sort of like bringing them in just for the sake of bringing them in. But I definitely think there's a lot to learn that we don't understand from a farm perspective. So the only other thing that I think is like really important, and I know you touched on it a bit, Lee, but just from a company perspective, maybe some more like marketing or digital marketing.
I just wrote that down.
Really?
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Just because I think it's so critical for the success of a business, but also then for the success of communicating everything that we're trying to achieve in an industry to the consumer as well. Because at the end of the day, the consumer will always drive the industry. So I think it's really important that those messages are communicated all the way through the chain. Yeah, that's awesome. Because we really didn't have anything about marketing, digital marketing on there. You touched it on a little bit, but yeah, I think that could be a whole segment. Yeah, and Noah and I have been thinking about how we would do this next year, and I don't think that we'll break it up into 3 days. I think that we'll have it as a 2-day workshop in each city, and we won't break it up by roaster and barista and cafe owner. I think it'll just be 2 days of content for coffee professionals, and it will be something where you should kind of attend all of it because it's all going to be relevant, and we're not just going to make it for specialty coffee. Not that we targeted this for specialty coffee, but we're going to be actively looking to go out there and bring the not so specialty coffee people into it as well, because they have a valid they have some valid shit to contribute to the conversation. Totally. You look at places like McDonald's, and the way that they run their systems is mind-blowing. And I think that could be something. I want to invite those folks to come and talk on a panel about systems and, the way that we run our cafes and whatnot. So we've got a lot to do in formulating this. But I think that we've definitely got some amazing suggestions from you all, so thank you. I can't wait to see all you guys next year. You all contributed in ways that will forever remain important to me. This was the first time we've ever done anything like this, and I'll remember all of you for the rest of my life because of the way that you contributed. It blew my mind. I think I cried personally with each one of you. Thanks for that. But more than anything, thanks for having a massive impact on my experience of the 2 weekends. I left these 2 weekends a changed woman, and it was because of each and every one of you, as well as everyone else that attended. I'm never going to be the same, and I can't thank you for that. So
thank you.
Lee, love you.
I love you guys too. I can't tell you. I'm like, okay, so I figured out what I want to do for the rest of my life. This was pretty amazing. And so thanks for being a part of that decision making for me, because I had an inkling before I left to go to Australia to do this, and then I came back being like, right, okay, so I got to find me a buyer for Elixir. And that was pretty profound. I got to tell you, that wasn't in my thinking at the beginning of this year or even the beginning of last month. But so you heard it here first. Yeah, there are going to be some people that are pretty pissed off at y'all for being so amazing, because that's what it's led to for me. But having said that, thank you all very much for not only doing this, but again, for being such a profound piece of my journey with regards to Map It Forward. It's been a big deal, and I hope that you all enjoyed it as much as I did, because my head's still exploding with ideas and inspirations and all of that from all the stories that you all shared. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And on that note, guys, we might say goodbye. Thank you for giving so generously of your time. and I will see. We will be sending out these surveys and all of that kind of jazz for this event now that I'm finally fucking back home. I'm so excited. I slept 2 nights straight in my own bed, and I'm so fucking excited about that. You have no idea. Better late than never. But yeah, all of that stuff's going to go out now. We're re-uploading all the videos to the Facebook groups currently as we speak, so that anyone who wanted to get access to the digital formats of these will be able to do so most likely in 2 days from now, and we'll be sending everything out so that you'll get the like super high discount for attending in person. So on that note, thank you all very much. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank
Hey
you.
guys.
Bye.
You know,
Bye.
Bye.